These will come up later. Okay. Time for chapter 11,000, yeah. My brain keeps wanting to say 11,000. No, 1,100. Bit of a difference. Good chunk of a difference. Actually, there's another one here that applies too, but I'll pull that out later with a joke. Okay, so into the chapter. So first off, we have the chapter title is Shamrock Takes the Stage. Gee, I wonder who Shamrock is referring to. This would have been an appropriate one to release around St. Patrick's Day. We'll get to that. But first we start off with Yamato's cover story. And we are basically seeing that Yamato and Tama are, well, it says infiltrating. They're literally just putting their heads through the window of the Hold'em, where Hold'em was trying to get back to and where he led them to. They're infiltrating the mysterious hidden base. Yeah, infiltrating. These guys are not that smart when you look at the other ones around them. So what we see are who were the different subordinates of Who's Who, all the ones that have like the cat zones of varying kind, the cat smiles. We kind of saw them when like Who's Who was going to fight Jimbei and stuff like that, but they weren't really involved in the fight, so we never really saw what any of them could do. I don't even think we got names on any of them. But we're seeing them here, and they're all in, like, they've still got, like, some of the Beast Pirate garb, but they're also, like, in kimonos and stuff like that, so they look more like they can blend in Wano. So, the base looks like Who's Who, because it's probably Who's Who's base, and then Hold'em was just working for Who's Who. There's a Who's On First reference here somewhere, but I still can't find it. Into the chapter itself. So we start off where we left off the last chapter with Luffy, Zoro, Nami, and Rodo arriving at the castle, and it is called the Elbaf Quest Castle. That's at least the way that it's said right now. We'll see if that changes at all. And Rode's talking, and he's like, in the 14 years since King Harald's death, no one has come near this castle. Okay, so it's been 14 years since King Harald died, so that means that would have been even before Shanks showed up at Elbaf. Because this would have been even before Shanks met Luffy, because that was 12 years ago that Shanks met Luffy. And so this is even before then. So Harald has been dead for a while. He died prior to the start of the story, or prior to when we get Luffy's initial flashback at the beginning of the first chapter. So Shanks wouldn't have been able to do anything to try to stop Harald's death. And we're also going to find some other information out in a few minutes about Yorl, whichever, in this regard. But, so Rode's talking, and he's leading them up to the castle, and he's like, so what's going on here? The door looks like it's been busted open. What happened to the guards? So I'm kind of assuming it's like this is a very sad place to want to go, but they still have guards posted here just to make sure people aren't going to sneak in and like vandalize it, I guess. Or, you know, make it an homage to Loki if they more believe in Loki, or do something against Harald if they didn't like Harald, type of a thing. And we're seeing the front door, and we're seeing that, yeah, like we saw earlier, it has been busted open. We know that this was Gunko and Shanks's brother. We're going to refer to him as not Shanks. We'll get his name later, but he's just not Shanks at the moment. Other Shanks, Dark Shanks, Evil Shanks, whatever you want to refer to him as, Cloaked Shanks, Hooded Shanks, I don't know. And they busted it open from the inside when they were going to go look for Loki after they arrived here. And Nami's like, what? Something's wrong. Wait, what? Something's wrong? And Zoro's like, it was broken from the inside. Why would intruders do that? Luffy's like, only one way to find out. Let's go. And Luffy's just like, zing, right inside, because that's the way Luffy's brain works. Because he is 100,020 million% Gryffindor. Which is not a bad thing, but he very much embodies those qualities. And Luffy's like, the key, where's the key? And like Zoro is just like, the damage looks recent, like as not like caused by when everything happened with Loki 14 years ago, but caused like 10 minutes ago, 10, 20, whatever minutes ago when they showed up. And they get inside, and like we see, as we saw before when we kind of saw the inside of the castle, it is falling apart. There are huge gash marks all over the place. There are trees that have started to grow all over the place, because of course the castle is kind of being reclaimed because nobody's really lived here. They've had guards show up every now and then to like keep an eye on the castle, but they haven't really repaired it or anything since Loki killed Harald 14 years ago. So there's like huge gashes all over the place in the walls and in the stone. And like this castle, like we saw how big Rhodes, little model castle was compared to Straw Hat's. This one is just so much bigger. It'd be like putting a tiny action figure inside of Buckingham Palace and being like, here, this is the size in comparison of how big this castle is. Huge. Massive. And like, so Luffy, Nami, and Zoro are going in, and Rhodes kind of poking his head, and he's like, wait, this is unnerving. And Luffy's just like, this place is huge. And he's like, I can barely see the ceiling. And then Nami's like, this is way too vast to be walkable. And Luffy is just one track mind right now. He is just like, hey, Roto, know where the key is? And Roto is now like picking up Zoro and Nami so he can carry them, because Luffy doesn't care about walking around. He's just going to bounce all over the place anyway. But Roto picks up Zoro and Nami, and it was like, okay, Nami didn't want him to be anywhere near her, but now it's just like, okay, now he's carrying her. I don't know. And Rhodes like, no, I'm just a run-of-the-mill guy. I've never even been in here before. I'm like, you're friends with Hyrule. We're going to find out they've known each other since, like, Rhodes was a little kid. And Hyrule was probably, like, 20-something. Given the age gap. Anyway, because there's the 18 years age gap between him and Rhodes, the same as there is between him and Loki. And it's like, you've never been to this castle before. You're a horrible liar, Rhodes. And Nami is just like, oh, well, I'm glad you're here now. Just manipulating him. He's like, oh, really, Namitasso? And Zoro is just like, yeah, agreed. Now get moving. Just because they don't want to walk. Which is fair. It's like, carried by the giant, have to walk your way through the entire castle. You definitely get your steps in. Like, I'll just be carried by the giant. Thank you very much. It's Rhodes. Can I get Gerd? Or Hyrule, or Stanton, or Goldberg, or Ripley, or someone else to carry me through this castle? Dory and Broggy, I'll ride on their helmet or something. I just don't want to be near Rhodes. Near Roto. So they're walking through the castle, and we're getting more of an angle of this from like looking down. We see that there's like pathways that have been, one of them was like sliced open. One of them has like a tree that's just like, the roots are just growing over the platform, the pathways leading through the castle. That's just caused so much damage to it and everything. Nature is reclaiming this place, because you leave a building uninhabited for long enough and it's just going to start just like, and vines and roots and trees and everything else will start growing. Nature will reclaim what has been taken from it. And they're just going through and just like, wow, wait, a castle? Being here is thrilling and terrifying. Wow, what a castle. Being here is thrilling and terrifying. Pretty sure that's Nami. And then just like, everything's falling to pieces. Is this the intruder's handiwork? And then and that might have been Zoro saying something, because we just see like Nami and Zoro are being carried by Rhodes, like I said, and then Luffy is just like zipping and zapping all over the place. One track mind, looking for the key. And then I'm assuming it's Rhodes like, no, this battle damage has been here ever since Loki killed King Harald. And Zoro is just amazed at everything. He's just like, this took some serious destructive power. And Rhodes like, yeah, Loki is a monster, and King Harald was renowned as a great warrior. This damage was inevitable. And Luffy is just like, wait, or it's just like, what? They're so big. And Nami's just kind of getting centered. So like, this is scary. Are they? And we cut to what they see, and they entered one of the rooms. We don't know exactly. This might have been the throne room when this happened, but we cut into this room that they arrived in, and there are just skulls all over the ground. And it's very similar to like the scene that we saw in Rhodes Castle, where it's like we see like the human skulls, but the skulls and bones and stuff like that. These are giants. These are bones of giants. And some of them have swords sticking into them. Some of them have, the helmets are still on. Some of them have horns. There's one very prominent one that has a horn coming out of its head, coming out of the side of its head like Kaido does. And like we've seen some of the little kids running around that have like horns coming out of their heads that are not helmets. And Luffy is just like standing on one of the swords that is like impaled through something. I don't know what, but it's impaled. It was impaled through something. And Luffy is just like, this place is covered with giant skeletons. And Road is just like, this castle once had numerous guards. On that day, around 100 of them stood ready to kill Loki, but only one survived, Lord Jarl. So, this battle took place 14 years ago. Loki killed King Harald, killed his father, and Jarl was the only survivor besides Loki. And Jarl still got impaled through the head with a sword. To be fair, there are cases in human history of people who have been impaled in the head in some shape or form, and they're still able to live and function and everything else like that. It's not like they're crippled or anything. But I know there was a case of a guy who had like a railroad spike that like went through his head, and it really messed up his brain a bit, but it made it that like he kept swearing. That was like what he kept doing. He just kept swearing and swearing and swearing and swearing again, and like that was what he could do now. That's all like he could say anymore was like swear words. So that would be an interesting way of like trying to learn how to communicate with someone, as all they're doing is swearing at you, or like go out in public with them and all they do is swear at everybody. And it's just like, he just means good morning. He wants to know where the eggs are in the grocery store. That one was an insult. Like, Jarl doesn't seem to be in this type of a condition. He still seems to be pretty in control of all of his faculties. But it's not impossible for people to have had, you know, a massive head injury like that and still survived and still be able to be cognitive and up and moving and everything. It's a very rare thing. And yeah, it could have been like the doctors on Elbaf were just like, because Gerd would have been a doctor already by this point in time, because this would have taken place after. So this was 14 years ago, which means it was 22 years ago. Would have been when Saul somehow ended up on Ohara, or well, after the Ohara incident 22 years ago. Saul would have ended up on Elbaf, and they went and they got the books and they brought them back and put them in the Owl Library and everything. Or either set up the Owl Library and that's where they started doing mass things, or maybe the Owl Library was there already and they had like a place to teach kids, because like that place looks like it's been around for longer than 20 years. And built it up that way and everything. But it became more of a focus at that point in time. Like, it became more of an acceptable thing to go to the library, to go to the school, to learn about more than just looking up fightings, looking up battles, or learning about them, or learning how to fight and everything else like that. Plus, we know that even like before that, Gerd was probably already a doctor. And such, we don't know when she first started to study to become a doctor, but she may have already been a doctor by the time this happened to Jarl. And she may have been the one who was like, okay, well, you're still functioning right now, but I don't think taking the sword out of your head is going to be the best idea in the world. So we'll leave it in there. And we'll just keep an eye on things. And see if anything happens. And he's been fine for the last 14 years, so that's something there, I guess. So Road continues, and he's like, after that, tragedy happened here. Coming to this site was forbidden. And he's like, it's a den for vengeful spirits. And I'm like, yeah, I can understand where that's coming from. Your king died, like 100 other warriors died. One of your elders was the only one to survive, and he's still injured. And then they had to, and then Loki went on a rampage, like out at sea or something like that afterwards. And then eventually he was, defeated by Shanks and brought back and chained to the bottom of, the Elbath tree. And everything, on top of everything else that Loki had already done, supposedly already done, that we learned about in the last chapter. So it's like this whole concept of like, well, what else are they, Loki did a whole bunch of stuff, and now this is like the outcome at the moment. Now there's still the whole possibility that like stuff is being blamed on Loki that's not 100% his fault, or it's been, pushed onto him, or he's like, fine, you want me to be the bad guy, I'll be the bad guy. Those might be some of the things where Loki is coming from in this regard. But we don't know the exact circumstances of this. There's a theory that like Harold was trying to, communicate with the world government and ended up being tricked because of his naivete, or because he was actually a bad king and he was just putting on this face to the citizens, and now he's just having to, and up to that point in time, he was just pretending to be, wanting to slowly weaken Elbath, weaken the warriors of Elbath by making them not as fierce to the world. And given one of the things we're going to see in a few minutes when we see his, in a moment or so when we see his portrait, we're going to get some dedication to at least something in this regard. I might lean more towards he was somewhat naive in dealings with the world government or with outside forces, because we still don't know like exactly how the summoning circle got to the castle. If it was there already, if it was something that like, this is a one-time thing that I can send you on, and once you take enough damage, you're going to be sent back to, Marijois, if Garling is the one that sent them. So, Luffy, again, is on top of one of the skulls now. And he's like, hey guys, look over here. This skull is enormous. Yes, Luffy. You also spent, like 2 arcs ago, you spent an entire night, which equated out to a shit ton of chapters, fighting inside and then on top of a Skull Dome island that was Onigashima. So this should not impress you as much as you're thinking it does, as much as you're acting as it does. But it's Luffy, and he's very easily impressed by things. Just look at Usopp's stories that Luffy was there for when they happened, and it didn't happen that way. So Luffy's like climbing all over the skull, and he's like, "This also, it's also got horns. I wonder if he knew Oars." That's where I was bringing up Oars. That was, the giant. The ancient giant that was on, that was the zombie that Luffy's shadow was put into on Thriller Bark and everything. They got referenced in the last chapter by Usopp and everything. And Road is just like, these belong to someone with ancient giant warrior blood. There are no longer any pure-blooded members of that clan, but their blood still flows in some of us. And so we had kind of had the thought that like Kaido and Yamato have like ancient Oni blood, so maybe that's something similar to what the giants were, but maybe not exactly, because like, Kaido's pretty big and everything, so there's a good chance that there was like giant blood in Kaido, like the Buccaneer race and stuff like that, like with Big Bomb and Whitebeard and stuff like that, given how much bigger they were and stuff like that. So there's thoughts there. Which means that all of Big Mop's children actually kind of have Buccaneer blood in them as well. It's just not necessarily like pronounced, except like maybe a little bit in like Katakuri and some of the other ones that are like really tall. But technicality there. But so this is, and the thing is like, we've seen Little Oars Jr. He was at Marineford and everything, and he seemed to have some type of a like son, grandson, whatever connection to Oars, the continent puller. I don't even remember how old Little Lors Jr. was supposed to be at Marineford. I don't remember. He's not one of the ages that I have off the top of my head. But what ended up happening is, you know, he still looked very much like a giant, like the, you know, ancient giant warrior. So maybe he was more like half ancient giant warrior, and then like a lot of these other giants here that we see are like the little kids that we see with the horns. My brain said antlers, and I'm like, that's not right. Those are deer. Those are what Chopper has. But like for them, maybe they're like, you know, like 1/8 or 1/16 or one something like that type of, you know, like ancient giant. And it's like with the fishmen and the merfolk or the minks, where it's just like, it's kind of a jumbly thing for like what you're gonna look like based around like even what your parents look like. You may look like them, you may not, you most likely will not. And it might just be that some of the giants, it's just like that part of their genetics, just their lineage factor just comes forward more in some than in others, and then they end up with, you know, horns on the side of their heads. And Road continues, and he's like King Harald, who has who was larger and stronger than most. And he's like, oh, look above you. And we look up and we see, and he's like, how majestic. And we look up and we see like the portrait that we saw in Shadow last time. And it's revealed that King Harald was, yes, this very big giant. And we see that he is bald on it, you know, he's bald on top. And like we see that there are scars, and we'll get a good look at the scars in a second. Better look at the scars in a second. We see that the portrait has been like cracked or broken in some shape or form. Just like all the walls around it and everything. There was a thought that I wanted to say. One of the things that I wanted to point out is a lot of the times in history there have been like different ones that were considered something the bald or something like that, as like the king or something like that. But it's like it was more meant to be like bold, not like they were like actually bald. It was they were bold. So maybe it's like this is a play off on that a little bit, where it's like King Harald was bald, but we're gonna find out there was a reason for that in a moment. And Road's like, that's a portrait of King Harald, the man who tried to form peaceful bonds with the outside world, said to be Elbast's strongest king. And it's like, and Road just said he was bigger than most, so I'm assuming it's supposed to be that Harald had been, his ancient giant blood may have been a bit more pronounced, because we cut to a more close-up picture of this, which King Harald still looks effing badass. And the scars definitely make him look even more badass, which is saying something. And he's like, those scars on his head mark where his ancient giant horns were before he ripped them off. Ow. That just sounds so freaking, oh my god. It's like, that shows dedication, and Zoro's going to concur with this in a moment. And, you know, and again, it's could be a combination of things that, you know, however the heck the world government has gotten involved with this, with Harald wanting to reach out to them and everything, or at least reach out to other countries. So Road continues, and he's just like, he believed the ancient giants were relics from a war-torn era. So we get like this little cut, you know, little image here of like one of the ancient giants, possibly Ors. But it's like, you know, the ancient giant with the horns and everything else like that. And then there's a whole question of like, what even was the thing that was the skull on Onigashima? Was that just rock carved to look like a skull? Was that an actual skull? How freaking big was that giant? Because it would have dwarfed any of the ones we've seen. And like, Nami is kind of in awe. Luffy is just like, he had horns? And it's just like, yeah. What he did with them, I have no idea. And Zoro's like, What conviction? And it's like, yeah, it's like that's saying something for Zoro to like be impressed by someone's conviction in that regard. And so they're still walking through the castle, and Rhodes keeps talking. He's like, after the king's death, the country fell into despair. Sadly, the one with the greatest grudge against Loki was naturally King Harald's other son, Hirudin. And Luffy's like, whoa, seriously? So, Luffy, Nami, Zoro, Chopper, Sanji, and Usopp were not with the others when it was revealed to them that Hirudin was Loki's brother. That was just to the other four. Robin, Frankie, Brooke, and Jinbei. They were there, and Bonnie, and Lilith. They were there when they had that reveal. But these ones did not know that. They were not there when that was told to them. And when we were getting all the list of stuff Loki had done last chapter, him being Hirudin's brother was not brought up in that. That wasn't something that was mentioned. So Luffy is surprised, and he's like, seriously? And Nami's like, he's Loki's brother? Now, Luffy and Zoro both interacted with Hirudin at Dressrosa. So they're a little bit more familiar with him and everything, during that arc. Nami, this is her first time interacting with Hirudin. The adventure on Elbaf here is going to be her first time interacting with any of these giants. Except for like Dorian, Broggy, and then Stanson. But she didn't super interact with Stanson when they were on Sabaody, but you get the idea. And Road is continuing. He's like, they had different mothers. I was on to something. I said they had different mothers. And it's like, before marrying the queen, Hirudin was born to a different woman. However, Elbaf would never have recognized Hirudin's mother as its queen in any case. And we're going to find out why in a second. Nami's like, why? And Rhodes says, she was born in a different giant country. I was very close. So I will take that as a win for me. I was very close. So what they're saying here, and this is sometimes similar to something that would happen in history occasionally, depending on like where a king's mistress was from or stuff like that. They were ostracized to a degree amongst the court. But in this case, it wasn't necessarily a mistress in this case. It may have been, like, we know that Saul is from at least a area where giants live that are not from Elbaf. Hundreds and hundreds of years ago, they may have been from Elbaf, but they don't consider themselves the same as the Elbaf giants. And we saw this with Saul when he first interacted with Robin back in Ohara, and he's like, no, I'm not like any of those warfaring giants on Elbaf. How time changes things. Saul. So we know that there's other giants out there, and that were not associated with Elbaf. We know that there are giants that are part of the Marines. We have the Giant Squadron there, John the Giant. Although John the Giant was from Elbaf and he was trafficked to the Marines by Mother Carmel, so that's different. But we know that there are other giants that are part of the Marines. We've seen several of them. There's, we saw a specific lineup of them at Marineford when that happened, and we've seen them kind of pop up a little bit every now and then too. So there's that. But, there are other giants that don't live on Elbaf. There are other communities of giants that live outside of Elbaf that are not Elbathian giants. And that seems to be where Hirudin's mother was from. And Hirudin is like 80-something years old. And there's that 18-year age gap between him and Loki. And Roden Goldberg by extension. But what we understand and what we're going to find out here implies that Harald may have been out at sea at some point in time and ended up falling in love with another giant. It is stated that she is she was born in a different giant country. So she is a giant from another giant country. And I think the same thing here would probably still apply if like Hyrudine's mother was human, which would be the exact opposite of what's going on with Ripley and her husband, and would have been the same thing that technically would have happened with like Loki and Lola had that happened. And that just seems far more unbelievable than Ripley having a human husband. But still. Or Loki thinking he has a shot with the giantess, with the female giants, although he kind of seems to be doing pretty good on that. But what ends up happening, what we kind of understand here, is that Loki's mother was a giant from another country that was not associated with Elbath. Somehow her and Harald met, and they fell in love, and they had Hyrudine, and she, maybe she, went back to Elbath with Harald and with baby Hyrudine, or like had Hyrudine on Elbath, and maybe they wanted to get married, but maybe they couldn't because of this stupid rule here where the queen, where like the elders of Elbath were like, no, you can't marry this woman. And this would have included both Jarl and Jarl at that point in time, because they would have been alive, because this would have been prior to Big Mom's flashback. Big Mom wasn't even born at this point in time. But what could have happened was they had, they had Hyrudine, and maybe they wanted to get married. And of course the king's like, well, we'll return to Elbath and we'll get married there. So we can have a big proper celebration, and then I can have you crowned my queen, and Hyrudine will be my heir and everything. And then they get to Elbath, and he introduces his wife and either new son, or maybe she's pregnant or whatever. And the other giants, the elders, are just like, no, you can't do that. We refuse to recognize this woman as our potential queen because she's not of Elbath. She will, we're going to get to a line here, though. It's like it will weaken the blood of the Elbathian warriors if you have a child with someone who's not, if like the king specifically has a child with someone who is not of Elbathian descent. Which is an argument that has been made multiple times throughout history in regards to, a lot of cases it was made to imply like having the king have a child, like one of his mistresses or something like that, who was not of royal or high enough noble birth that it would be weakening the blood, even if they were, an illegitimate child, or that type of a thing. Or like the king marrying a commoner and having a child with them. That was considered very much like, no, you can't do that. You cannot do that. That is not acceptable. Because it will weaken the royal blood or whatever. A lot of the times those were different arguments that were made. That has kind of gone a bit by the wayside, particularly much more in the 21st century, and very much into like, the 80s and the 90s and into now, and with everything, with Prince William of England, he married Kate Middleton, and then Harry married Meghan, and then there's like other princesses and other princes from various countries all over the various other monarchies all over the world that have married quote unquote commoners, and made them queens or their consorts or so, depending on if it was like the prince or the princess or whatever that was the one who married. And if you just look at all the Hallmark movies and Lifetime movies that are out there about, some American girl going off to Europe and somehow falling in love, or finding and falling in love with like a prince or a duke or something from another country, half those freaking countries are already like, their royalty is already like half American anyway, if you want to go through that line. My mom loves Hallmark. I like some of the movies too, but she delves far more into all the Hallmark stuff than I do. So that's kind of what's going, similar things are what's going on here, except that in this case, the giants were refusing to accept Hyrudine's mother as a potential queen. And so Zoro's asked, so what does that matter? They were both giants, right? And Rhode's like, they were both giants, so this confirms that Hyrudine's mother was a giant, as I said. He's like, but you can't talk when you humans kill each other all the time over land. And Zoro's like, I suppose. That, that's a pretty good commentary on what's going on both in the One Piece world right now and in our world, where we kill each other over land, over the color of our skin, over religion, over that type of stuff. And in this case, it's like, well, they're both giants, so shouldn't that be good enough? And it's just like, well, not necessarily. And Luffy's just like, wow, and he's running up the stairs. He's not paying a whole lot of attention to what's being said in the background. Again, it's like, I'm still amazed Luffy sat and listened to, like, part of the information that Jarl was telling him last time. Road continues, and it's like, they say having children with a giant from another land taints the blood of Elbas. So again, there's that. So by a technicality, that means, like, Colin is considered, less, because he's half giant, because he's half human and half giant, because his father's a giant, or his mother's a giant and his father's a human. But that stigma may have kind of been getting worn away at, between, like, Hyrudean proving himself and everything, because we see Hyrudean training very hard in Big Mom's flashback, when he was 18, and that was, 63 years ago. We see Hyrudean training very hard during the flashback. So, and they keep going, and Nami's like, it seems giants can be just as bigoted as anybody else, as anyone else. And Road's just like, not everyone's as pure as you, Nami Tasso. And she's like, don't suck up to me, trash. He's like, huh? It's like, Nami, you're the one letting him carry you. It's like, that's because I don't want to have to walk around. And Zoro asked a very poignant question of, like, why join Hyrudean's crew if you think he has tainted blood? And Zoro looks like he's, like, glaring to a degree at Road with this. And Road's like, well, and we get a little flashback here, which will probably get expanded on a little bit in the anime. But we see, like, little Road with, like, a little mini scarf wrapped around him, and he's, like, being beat up on by these other kid giants, and they're just like, you're such a creepy nerd, Rodo. And then we see, like, Hyrudean comes over, and he does the thing where Hyrudean knows what it feels like to be different. Hyrudean would have grown up being not necessarily ostracized. We're going to find out that his mother was ostracized, and he could not live in the palace, could not live in the castle with his father because of who his mother was. And his father was like, it's probably a good idea for you to live with your mother, and, like, I'll come and visit you, and you can still come and visit me, but you can't live here, unfortunately, type of a thing. So Hyrudean knows what it's like to feel different. And he saw Road being treated differently. I mean, like, Hyrudean and Gerd were friends when they were kids. They've been friends since they were children, and same thing with, like, Stanton and Hyrudean. But, like, so Hyrudean is kind of the one offering out this, hand of friendship to Rodo here. And he's like, he runs over and he, like, sees, like, what Road is drawing, which is, sea charts and everything. He's like, this is amazing. You can draw sea charts? You gotta show me how. And he's like, let's be friends. Road, huh? Friends? Just, like, very confused. So it is kind of this thing where it's just like hey, you can draw really cool. Let's be friends. And then they're friends. And Road, unfortunately, still continues. This is before Road has fully gone down the creepy path of trapping humans in a castle in a diorama set. And some of those humans turn out to be, like, Cypher Pull agents, which is just hilarious. Which is just hilarious. I love that joke. That, like, little drop of information in the last chapter from Gunko. But he's explaining, and he's like, he was always so earnest and straightforward, unlike me. He never lived in the castle growing up. His father may have been king, but his mother was ostracized. He endured a lot and still said this, one day I'm going to unite all the giant tribes. I'm going to be king of the giants. And we cut down to the village where they're still having this, like, big party. And, we're seeing Gerd and Hyrudean and Stanton and Goldberg and a bunch of the other giants all around them cheering him on and everything, and they're making this big toast, and Hyrule proclaiming, "I'm gonna be king of the giants" and everything, and it's just like, woo! I know you're the man that can do it, and Hyrule, and they're just like so happy, and it's like, kind of this is showing that during the course of Hyrule's life, and probably through his own actions too, and to a degree also through like Loki's actions as well, that Hyrule is like trying to prove to the giants that just because my mother, and Hyrule's mother may very well still be alive. His father's dead, but his mother may still be alive, and we might see her later. Maybe she's like taking up the role of like the old crone woman that lives in the lives on the outskirts of the village, and people go and visit her at times for advice or something like that. Maybe she slowly was allowed a little bit more into Elbathian culture, or maybe she did end up dying at some point in time. We just don't know yet. And then at some point, the council or whatever probably put pressure on Hyrule's father, on Harald, to be like, hey, you need to produce a legitimate heir. He's not good enough in the form of Hyrule. He won't be accepted as king. You need to marry a woman from Elbath and have a child with her. And that will be your heir, and she will be the queen. And that's what would have resulted in, he married whatever woman they found acceptable. Maybe it had been someone he'd known or something like that. And then maybe it was a casting call for a queen. Maybe they pulled the Cinderella trope and they just threw a ball and invited all of the eligible maidens in the kingdom. And instead of everybody dressing up in ball gowns, everybody wore their finest battle armor. I want that as a version of Cinderella now. I want that as a version of Cinderella now. What's a fairy godmother that one shows up, takes like the lowliest little, girl in the, that's of the right age for the king, and like uses their power to give them like a beautiful shining gold or silver, armor that will be like amazing for fighting, and they can fight anyway. So it's like, whichever one of you can best the king in combat, can survive long enough against the king in combat, will be the next queen. It's like, is that the Elbath version of Cinderella? I want that to be the Elbath version of Cinderella. What do they lose when they run out? They lose their Viking helmet, when they lose their battle helmet when they run out. Shoes might be a little too hard to try to pull off for that one, because they're not going to have glass slippers while they're fighting. That would be funny. I don't know. They lose their battle axe or their sword on the way out of the castle, because at midnight it's going to expire, so they have to get out of there. That's my take on this for the Elbathian version of Cinderella. Please, someone make that a thing. I want that to be a thing now. That just sounds great. So they're just like, yeah, we see them all cheering for Hyrule. And then we cut back and we see Road, and he's like, I want to make his dream a reality. So it's like, then maybe stop kidnapping humans with crows, with your raven. Maybe don't do that anymore. Although by a technicality, as has been pointed out, Road technically kind of saved the day with keeping a bunch of the Cypherpole agents trapped in his diorama. So they couldn't send information back to Marijois, which is kind of helpful, I guess. But like Zoro's like, that kind of boring motivation. It's nothing new to me. It's just like, yeah, you're the one following the silly little rubber boy around for the last 1,132 chapters? I don't remember. Whatever chapter Zoro officially joined the crew. You've been running around with him for that many chapters. So yeah, you know the boring motivation of like, I want to make his dream come true. Yep. And then Navi just starts laughing off to the side, which is just funny because she knows exactly how that works. She knows exactly how that works because she's in the same boat. And Luffy's like, hey, this way, I found some knocked out guards. So we don't see the guards, but these would be the two guards that Gunko and Shanks' brother interacted with. Hi. Good girl. My good puppy boo. These would be the two guards that they interacted with and probably tortured information out of to try to figure out where Loki was. And this is where we cut in the chapter. We cut down to the realm of the dead, or the underworld realm, primordial world. And it's like, do you finally understand? And it's Gunko still talking to Loki. And Loki has been beaten up. Gunko has been having fun beating him up. And he's like huffing. He's like, this is only because I can't move from this spot. And he's just like huffing and angry about this. And we see Shanks' brother, and he's like, the result would be the same even if you could. As in, like, you'll still get beaten up even if you could move. That's a given for what's going on right now. And we see Gunko, and she's like, you commoner. And we cut, and we see that Gunko has used her arrows. They're going to be arrow powers. She has the arrow fruit. We'll get to that later. She has her arrow powers, and she has used them to basically gigantify her boots. Gigantamax her boots, for a Pokemon term here. And she's made them very tall. So she is now very tall as well. And she's been using them to attack Loki. Using the arrows and the boots and everything to attack Loki. And considering she's a God's Knight, I'm going to assume that she has armament and observation hockey on top of this, on top of the fact that Loki is like immobile at the moment and can't really dodge any of these attacks. She's like, we are offering you a chance at divinity. Most die squirming in vain just for the slightest chance to attain such an honor. I do have to admit, I do like Gunko's boots. I know a lot of people are like, I don't really care for Gunko's design. It doesn't seem One Piecey enough. And I'm like, I think it looks fine. I think it would be kind of interesting if, like, maybe one of Oda's daughters kind of came up with this design or something. That would be kind of interesting. And he's like, yeah, I can use this here. And he uses Gunko as, like, a way of, like, showing, like, something for his daughters, which I think sounds interesting. So then we see Gunko is using her arrow abilities more, sending out another arrow that's going to make, there's an arrow that goes, and it's going to, like, go right past Loki's face, and then the other one is going to come up, and he's like, this again. And he's like, so, you're going to let loose a full speed kick to the right side of my face. It'll turn me sideways, and then you'll uppercut me. Thanks for giving me notice. And so it's like he's, based on the trajectory of the arrows, he's going to be able to, feel, where Gunko is going to hit him. And Gunko is just, like, getting ready for this, and she's just, like, all calm and everything, and, like, using one of the arrow things to, like, bulk up her other arm, bulk up one of her arms. And she's like, these arrows show the trajectory of my future. The outcome is unavoidable. Only I can stop it before it happens. And we get a really nice double page spread here where Gunko, as she's like, just say the word, Loki, will you join the God's Knights? And we see her, and she's like walking on the arrow path that has been made. She's like walking on that toward him. And he's like, I refuse, you fool. And this just, Gunko then just, kicks it into high gear, starts running, and just kicks Loki across the face, and then shifts her momentum, and then from the bottom just, like, uppercuts him with her leg. Not with her leg, she uppercuts him with her fist, excuse me. And it's just like, so it's like, type of a thing. And that's gonna hurt. And Loki's just like, ugh. He's in a lot of pain right now. He's probably been kicked this way several times already, given the blood and everything that we see coming out of his mouth. And then we cut back and we see that there are other animals that have shown up that are, like, we see a bear, we see, like, the thing that looks like a crocodile, we see, like, the wolf is still there. We see that a lot of these animals have all been, like, stabbed by the arrows, by Gunko's arrows, very similarly to what happened to the wolf in the last chapter. And yeah, one of the things that I saw is that, depending on what Loki's reactions are going to be, if he does end up getting freed by either Luffy or whatever, in this case, that when he's freed, it's like he keeps talking about like destroying the world and everything else like that. And if the first thing he does is he ends up like avenging his animal friends, I'm like, okay, that's a point in Loki's scoreboard for possibly not being such a bad guy. He avenged his friends. But then we'll see if he goes and tries to destroy the world. And we'll see what happens here. And he's just like coughing up blood and everything. And he's like, damn it, you'll pay for this. And Gunko is just unleashing more arrows pointing at him, ready to, unleash another barrage of just like kicks and punches and stuff like that. And he's like shouting, stop, enough already. And she's like, well, will you become a god's knight? And he's just like, blah. And just like, screaming at them like, no, type of thing. Of course I'm not gonna. And we cut down to where we see the Shanks' brother. He's still hooded at this point in time. We see his sword. This sword doesn't look as much like Griffin. It looks like much longer and skinnier, more of a rapier design to a degree. Is the best example I can give of what Griffin looks like, Shanks' sword. So it doesn't quite look the same, but it does look a bit similar, particularly for the handle. And he's like, that's all right, it's all right, Gunko. And she stops, and then we get the final double-page spread of the chapter, which just looks awesome. And we're going to finally get the guy's name and more of a face reveal for him. And he stands up, and he, like, pulls his hood back or whatever. And this is going to be, like, probably very dramatic in the anime when they get to it. Like, dun, dun, dun! Just, like, guy just, like shaking his hair out and everything. Because he's got, like, nice, long, pretty hair. And he's like, let's change our tactic. Contact Marie Joie. And we get a full body shot of Shanks' brother. Okay, we don't 100% know if it's Shanks' brother yet, but it's probably Shanks' brother. And it's just like, not every piece ends up being useful. I wanted to go about this more shrewdly, but I guess not. And she's like, not yielding if it means death, is what Gunko says. And she's like, do we chalk this up to faith? And we get the info box for this Shanks-like character. And it is Captain of the Gods Knights, World Noble, Figarland Shamrock, son of Elder Figarland Garling. Hence why I have Lucky Charms. Because Shamrock. And why I'm wearing a green shirt that actually has, like, clovers on it and everything. So, I bought this Tuesday before this had been revealed in the spoilers, or at least before I'd seen it in the spoilers. I'm like, well, my brain tapped into something. So, I have Lucky Charms for a little while. So, I went through and did a little bit of like research on like shamrocks because of this. Because I have the habit of being able to find like 4 and 5 leaf clovers, and those are a little different than shamrocks. So the information that I went into, first of all, I did actually look up Shanks' birthday, and it is in March, but it's March 9th, not March 17th, I believe, which is St. Patrick's Day. Which would have been like a nice little clue here if it had been like St. Patrick's Day. It was like Shanks' birthday. But that's always something that could be retconned. Now, Shamrock here, he looks very similar to Shanks, obviously, except he has both arms. That's a given. He doesn't have any scars on his face. And his hair is a lot longer than Shanks, and he's kind of got it braided. He also is wearing like the military type dress that we've seen, kind of fancy military type dress. He's got really cool looking boots, which is, I guess, fun. So we get that. So I looked into the shamrocks a little bit, and it's just shamrock. A shamrock is a type of clover used as a symbol in Ireland. St. Patrick, one of the Irish patron saints, is said to have used it as a metaphor for the Christian Holy Trinity. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, or Holy Ghost, depending on which way you want to put it. So there's kind of like a callback, there's like that type of a thing there, and it's like, again, I don't know how much information Oda has looked into in regards to like shamrocks, but he's kind of probably looked into them a bit to like throw this in there and have that be a thing, which is fine and interesting to see, but there's not really that much other information that I could find that would like apply to this. It is specifically shamrocks are the 3-pointed ones, not the 4 or 5-pointed ones. Like what I've found, those are the 4 and 5 leaf clovers. I still don't know how I found so many of those damn things, but I keep finding them. Still don't know how, but I do. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. And then we get like a little another info box on Gunko, going back to her, and it says, God's Knight Gunko, arrow fruit. So she has the arrow fruit. So it is not impossible for God's Knights to have devil fruit powers. And she has one. She has the arrow fruit, which is what she's been using. And it seems more not like the arrow is in like a bow and arrow. It's more like she is able to create arrows, like physically form, like like the arrow lines and stuff like that we've seen her using, which is a bit of an interesting way of using that power. And then like her using like the arrows to like layer in, like make her boots bigger and make her gauntlets bigger, so that way she's able to use them for attacks. And then she's probably like layered them in hockey, which is like a really good idea in my opinion. Seems like a very good idea. I think it's Shamrock that's still talking, and he's like, long ago the savage warriors of Elbath dominated the new world. The world government will bring them to heel no matter what. Okay, we'll see how that goes. Don't know what's going to happen there. I honestly don't know. Shamrock is, he looks so much like Shanks. I don't know if they're going to have him voiced by the same actor as Shanks. He has enough of a different image from Shanks himself that I'm hoping that if Luffy and the others interact with him, Luffy is going to pick up on it, like, pretty quickly, that it's like, you're not Shanks. You have 2 arms and no scars, and your hair's long, and why are you in that outfit? It's like, like Luffy might fall for it for like a second, but like I'm hoping between him and like Nami and Zoro have like seen, Shanks as wanted posters, I would assume. And Luffy may have told them the story, told them or the rest of the crew the story about like what happened with Shanks when Luffy was a kid. So there is a very high probability that one of them is going to figure out exceedingly quickly that this is not Shanks. And we'll see what happens with that. We'll see what they do with the Shanks design. I don't know. I kind of had the thought of like, I wonder if they're going to have Shamrock have green hair while Shanks has red hair, which would be a very good distinction between the two of them. But from what we've seen from Garling in his younger days at God Valley, he had red hair, or most likely had red hair. So we'll see what happens. But it's like, yeah. So Shamrock is now the captain of the God's Knights. That was the position that Garling held, but now Garling is a Gorosei, as one of the Elder Stars, and Shamrock is now like he's following his father's orders, both as his father and as a Gorosei, to go and try to recruit Loki probably, and then to try to bring Elbath to heel, as they said, which they have been unable to do for about 700 years since the Void Century. They tried bringing Wano to heel, and that didn't go well. For various reasons, so we'll see what happens. That's what we have here. I thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!